So hey everybody, I've decided to step outside for a minute, take a little break from the comic book. I was working on a page just a few off from what you guys have seen. I've got, I don't know, I'm probably way too close to this camera. I can't see myself right now. So hi, and welcome to my garden, because we're going to take a look at all of the things that inspire me in my book. Yeah, a little bit of a side venture today. So I'm just gonna spin around so I can see what I'm shooting, and yeah, that helps. And we'll just do a little pan. I'm gonna kind of start from the one corner and work my way around. I got some things all bundled up cozy in the corner. And this is our prize apple tree. It's translucent, but you can't get anywhere. You can't buy the apples anywhere. You can't get the trees anywhere. You know, the garden centers don't have this variety. It's some old heritage that was probably brought over here from Europe. God, a long time ago. This tree, we don't know how old it is. It's been here a really long time. So. The apples are amazing. There's nothing like the apples from this tree. So I'm actually going to, if you can see those straight ones coming off the top, they're going to get pruned. I'm going to try and make new trees out of them. So those straight ones don't ever produce much fruit, so they're kind of useless. They just take energy from the tree. So we're going to lop those off anyways. Down here around the tree, I'm just going to do some low sort of like shallow growing plant, low impact plants. Some onions and some leeks and some garlic and herbs. I've got some oregano right there at the base of the tree here. It's doing really nice. This is some really ratty looking foxglove. It'll bounce back in the spring. It'll flesh out, and it puts up these nice flower spires that are quite lovely. Get the bees and the hummingbirds. We get lots of hummingbirds. Yeah, let's see. We got all sorts of things growing and doing things underneath here. Some flowers that'll come back in the spring again. There's a nice big slug. It's, if you haven't noticed, very wet and green here, even though it's December. Not today, actually. Today's the last day of November. Tomorrow is December 1st. And we still have green lawns and things growing. Look at my kale. We live in a temperate rainforest here, and of course my book is set in this place, so on the west coast of Canada here in BC. I figure that there's all sorts of landmass change. I figure there's going to be lots of volcanic eruptions. We live on a fault line, so I figure there's going to be some upheavals. The landmass is going to change quite a bit, but it's more or less going to be the same as it is here now. So very wet, very mild. We don't get a very drastic temperature change from summer to winter. Just about 15 degrees really, 20 degrees at the most. So we live close to the ocean here. We're right on the beach. Not me personally, that would be too much. But we're about a 15-minute walk from the beach. It's not too bad. It's all downhill too. It's all the way uphill, all the way back too. These are my artichokes, and they're perennials, so they'll just stay here. I've just moved them. They were off in the bed over there near those concrete pots sitting there. But that's my neighbor's allotment, so just from this plank on your left and over to the corner where the rain barrel is. The rest of this bed here is all me. It's all empty right now. I've just finished pulling everything out. The last of the things to go is the Brussels sprouts. Just chopped them down yesterday. So they could have stayed, but I really want to get this bed ready for next spring. So that's part of the whole gardening thing, is your dirt is what makes your plants grow. And if there's not enough food in there, they won't do very well. So this needs a lot of food, this bed. It's got a lot of rock and sand in it and clay, which don't really feed your plants at all. So yeah, you can see all this stuff here. There's a lot of rock. It sort of sticks together, but there isn't any nutrients in it, and the only reason it's sticking together is because of the clay. So what you really want in a soil is something more And this is just newly amended, so I haven't mixed it in enough yet, but you get some of this stuff in here. So this is some old grass clippings and leaf mold. And the leaves have all been mulched in the mower, like when the mower picks them all up. I actually got this from my parents' place. He's got a nice, Dad's got a nice ride-on mower that sucks up all the stuff. He bags it all. So he's mulching all these leaves, and then the grass gets all mixed in. And because it's mulched, it breaks down a lot easier. And you can see it's sort of all stuck together, but it's also sort of slimy. And you can see the water seeping out of it is quite dark in color. It's kind of like a dark tea color. And that's all the nutrients in there. All the nitrogen and the, I don't know, calcium and magnesium and things that are in the grass that are now being broken down by little microbes for the plants to eat when I plant my lettuce here in this nice long bed. You can see there's a nice trench that runs right here. That is actually the drip line from the roof. So I'll plant on either side of that, and every time it rains this spring, my lettuce bed will get nice deep watering. So that should be nice and delicious. And this spot's nice and shady, so they won't get too hot. Lettuce doesn't like a lot of heat. So it'll get bright morning sun before it gets really hot, and then in the hottest part of the day it'll be nice and cool and shaded, so my lettuce doesn't run away on me. Lettuce likes to bolt, they say. It stands all up straight, it stops being lettuce and starts being a flower. It looks all silly. It doesn't taste as good anymore either, so we'll avoid that. Let's see, over here I got my potato box. So I plant all my potatoes and yams in here, and if you slowly add soil on top of the plants as you go, I try to leave a little bit of the top showing, but I bury up the stem, and every time you do that, add a couple layers of soil, you get another layer of potatoes. So once this box is full, it's going to be outstanding how many potatoes and yams are going to be busting out of this thing. You can see how big it is. If I turn the camera around, you can see how tall it is, you know, just about up to my armpit there. So yeah, that should be pretty good. And I'll I've started stuffing this side with strawberries. So I've worked a bunch of compost in between the two slats, the front and the back of the pallet, and stuck my plants in between. And try to make sure that your strawberry roots are going straight down. So a lot of these guys are planted quite close to this wood, but you get enough compost in there and the roots will sort themselves out. So they don't mind. They don't need a lot of dirt. They don't mind a shallow trough to grow in. I've seen people grow them in rain gutters and things like that. So these guys I actually only transplanted the other day. It's probably been 3 or 4 days now, 5 days. And it actually snowed the next morning. We don't ever get snow here, but we got about a half an inch, and I mean it was gone by the end of the day. But I was so worried. I came rushing out here, and look at this. They've got brand new flowers on them. There's 2 brand new ones right there. There's a couple brand new ones right here. There's a couple up here. So they don't care. They're doing great. This guy's busting out some new leaves. So these guys are an ever-bearing variety, and they are meant to sort of keep going all year round. But I was certain they were done, and that's why I transplanted them. I had them up around the apple tree, but with that new box, I needed to add the soil over there. So these guys had to move, or they were going to get buried. And this is a much sunnier spot for them too. They struggled a little bit in the midsummer. They kind of took a little nap because they weren't getting enough sunlight, I think. So this should be a much better spot for them. I'm quite excited. We're going to have lots of strawberries. Because what these guys are going to do, because they're ever-bearing, they sort of naturally just kind of take a break. So these flowers will probably just sit here. And in the spring, when it warms up, they'll be ready to fruit. So that's pretty exciting. It's like they get a little head start. So I'll have fruit quite early from these guys, especially if I throw a little plastic tarping over this and make it a little bit of a greenhouse for them. I could have strawberries in February. So that's pretty exciting. Let's see, what else have we got? This is sort of my junk heap. We actually have plans to put a bit of a greenhouse in this space between the shed and the fence here. That's our neighbor's property just on the other side. Those boxes and everything are hers, but you can see like this extra fencing, there's a coil of fencing there. That's all going to be recycled into my garden. So I'm going to stuff it with all of this lovely leaf mold that I was showing you in the dirt in the garden earlier. So again, this is that nice sticky and smelly. It smells like poop, even though it's not. So it's anything that's stinky, I say, is good for the garden. Plants love it. So I'll stuff those with I'll make little towers with these bits of fencing and stuff it full of dirt and plant things all up the sides. So just like the strawberries. And on this shady side of the box, I'll do herbs. And there's a pallet leaning against the fence there, and the one next to it on the ground is getting ready to go back up against the fence post. I'll stuff these all up with dirt and grow my shade herbs. So things like oregano and parsley and thyme, lots of thyme, I like thyme, and basil. Basil might do okay in that sunnier box there. It's a greedy one. So this over here is my cold frame. So this allows me to carry on my growing seeds. And if we just pop this corner open, I'll just give you a little peek inside. I don't want to let all the warm air out. So down in the back on the left is my chard, and you can see it's growing. I think it's grown a ½ inch since yesterday, I swear. It's really loving this little bit of protection it gets. So, and then on the right side is the broccoli. It's also doing really nicely. You can see I've got a little bit of yellowing in there on the broccoli. The chard should be yellow. Some of it is supposed to be yellow. But it's doing pretty happy. It's got a lot of compost, but a handful of Epsom salts is really what I'm looking for that yellowing. I need to boost my magnesium levels, so it'll also improve my kale. I've got some yellowing kale in here that just needs a little boost. Still tastes good, but I tend to just let it mulch. I'd rather eat the green ones. So I just reach in here and pull out the weaker ones, throw them down there. Kale is probably my prize in the garden, aside from the apple tree, I guess. It just keeps growing and growing and growing, and it tastes better the more frost and things it sees. So it starts getting these sort of bruised leaves from the frost, and it just opens the flavor up so much. It's quite delicious. So I'm excited. I got a whole bunch marinating in the fridge right now for dinner. We got a nice big rain barrel. It's always dripping there. So why not? We made the use of it. So we can water even when it's dry. It was dry a lot last year, and because we're on a well, we don't have city water, but we pump our own water. It can get low when it's dry, and it's risky. You don't want to overdo it, so we use as little as possible when we can. Here I have a trellis that I've just built. I've been getting a lot done since I've sort of wrapped up last season's garden and have all of this open space where I'm not where I'm not trampling plants. So I've installed this little guy, and so I'll grow some climbing beans or peas or some pretty flowers, kind of mix them all up the two posts in the front. And then here you can see there's a slat that's missing. I actually found this way, like everything else in my garden. Everything is found and reclaimed. We share property with several other tenants, and it's actually a farm owned by our landlord. So there's all sorts of things that kind of get left behind and aren't wanted and just kind of find their way here to the property. So it's we're always sort of welcome to reuse things. And so that's really been a boon in the garden, because of course I don't have to spend as much money. And things like that tower of fencing over there is going to make home for about 3 or 4 dozen bush bean plants and squash and other things like that would otherwise probably take up the whole size of this bed, and instead I can do it just in a fraction, and I could probably even just put them along the fence line there. They don't even have to be in the main bed, so I can double my garden space by doing that. And it's all about that. Everything here is about making it as efficient as possible. So, and making it as least work as possible. If I grow vertically, I have less problem with weeds and things being distributed by birds and, you know, being dropped on the ground and that kind of stuff. So, it helps a lot. We get a lot of birds, and there's a lot of other farms around here. So there's always seeds getting dropped. I get all sorts of things coming up in my garden that really didn't think I had planted. So yeah, over here I'll do, in this gap that I was just mentioning briefly earlier, I will place a raised bed underneath with some more recycled materials. We've got some nice plastic mesh that I'll put up and fill with compost. And then it'll all be cucumber on this side and zucchini on the opposite side. And I'll place them just underneath this gap and train them up onto this first rung. And then they can just climb right up. And all their fruit will hang down underneath here and grow nice and straight, and it'll all be off the ground, so the slugs and the bugs and the things that are crawling around down here don't ruin my zucchini or my cucumber. It'll keep them safe. So, whoops, I'm falling in a hole. I was digging in yesterday and starting to mix in my compost, so I'll dig a little bit of a hole and I throw things like those broccoli or Brussels sprout stems. Any of the garden waste gets buried, so it's getting reused. I don't have to wait for it to compost because it's going to compost right there in the ground. So even next year when I turn the bed over, I'll be turning over the compost that I put in there this year. So it just continues to feed the garden constantly. Then there's no gaps in the feeding schedule. If I miss fertilizing them, it's not going to matter because there's already stuff in there for them. So what else have we got? That's the brunt of it. It's all just kind of coming together slowly. You can see all my newspaper creeping out from underneath those planks. It's just to help keep the weeds at bay. That's the biggest thing about this garden bed. We actually use a lot of cow manure from the farm. It's free, just like everything else that's coming into the yard here. So is, of course, full of grass seed, hay, alfalfa, and all sorts of things, which a lot of the time I don't mind. I let the green mulch grow in between my plants. If they're hardier plants that don't mind sharing a bit of space with some weeds, because I'll eat that alfalfa. I will clip it and mulch it into the soil just to feed the plants too. So we're pretty weed friendly here. I like the buttercup because it brings the bees around, things like that. So I find as long as it's not disturbing my plant's root system, my veggies root system, I kind of leave it be. It's there for a reason. So that's sort of the name of the game for organic gardening, is just using the resources that you have instead of using chemical resources or man-made resources. And that's really the brunt and the heart and soul of the survival of the people in my book. Is there are people who had sort of survived in the first place, at the major cataclysm, at the end of times before the time of the book. Anybody who was able to take care of themselves and use the things around them and the things that come naturally in their environment to survive, then those are the people who are going to thrive in a collapsing economy and in a collapsing civilization. So, as imaginary as my book is, it's a reality that we live in a time that is changing, and it's important to do what we can to support ourselves. I'm not a great believer in dependency or self-sustainability, but I'm getting my words all confused. I believe more in self-reliance, let's say. It's easier to do as much as you can and trade for the rest than it is to grow everything you need. I obviously here don't have the space to do a great big wheat field. Even if I tore up all that lawn in the back there, it wouldn't be enough to grow enough flour for bread for the year. So, it would just be a ridiculous amount of work and even to store all that grain. I would have a hard time finding the space to store that grain. It's an apartment. It's not a mansion. So, it's all about doing as much as I can and replacing as much produce as is sensible and using my time as wisely as possible to make the most of my resources. That's, I think, where security in our future lies. So right here you can see I've found some nice big cedar branches. This is all windfall. This is stuff that came down last winter or even earlier this season, or even last 2 years ago. And it just came out of the cedar trees over in the background there. They're nice and big and healthy, and they got a lot to share. So I thought they wouldn't mind if I borrowed these from their ground, from the soil above their roots. You know, these would have naturally broken down and fed the trees, but it was going to take a long time for them to break down, and there's plenty of other good stuff under there. So I thought I could borrow these, and I will stick them in the dirt over here, but in that little narrow bed, and grow my tomatoes on them. So that should look really pretty. I look forward to seeing that. Yeah. So yeah, it's all about making what you can work. So the cold frame was a really important addition, because what that's going to do is it's going to feed us our green veggies for the winter. So we live on an island. It's although there is a lot of farming on our island, a lot of our produce still comes from California, and it's never that fresh. You know what I mean, right? It's coming in from Spain, it's coming in from wherever, and it's been shipped to you via truck and freight train, and God knows how it's gotten there. But by the time it gets to you, it's lost so much of its nutrition. Doesn't matter what it is. Like the kale, the minute you pick it, its vitamins start to break down. Any vegetable, any fruit, the vitamins, the nutrients that you're really looking for in that food are breaking down right away. So, you know, then an apple that you pick up at the grocery store is actually the last year's apple. If you're buying an apple in February, that apple is old. If you're buying an apple in August, that apple's even older. Like, I'm talking, that apple came from the previous July, you know, that apple came from the previous season. It's been sitting in a warehouse for a year, and they put it in a gas chamber with special gas that slows down its aging so it doesn't rot, but all those nutrients are still breaking down, and what you get at the end of that year is just a big ball of sugar. That apple doesn't have any vitamin A in it left. There's no vitamin C in there. There's no niacin, or I don't know what even's in an apple, but it's not there in that grocery store apple. So yeah, I've really I've been working at sort of developing and growing as much as I can just to get that nutrition I know I'm not getting from the food that I'm buying at the grocery store. And that food that I'm buying at the grocery store just gets more and more expensive every year, even every month. You know, I'm spending $4 on a bell pepper. It's ridiculous. So I've just decided that's it. I'm going to use the resources I have at my disposal, and I spend a couple of days a week in the garden. I treat it like a part-time job, and I'm not producing enough exactly currently. I'm slowly producing enough. I sell the odd bunch of kale. It's not bringing in a lot of cash right now, but that's okay. It's bringing in just enough for me to start collecting seed for next spring. And a lot of the garden costs, it's really just my time and my labor, so that helps a lot. You know, I borrow everything I can from Mina and the studies that I've done into gardening over the years, just to bring realism to her sort of approach in gardening. I wanted to make sure that the plants that she was dealing with, or the methods that she's using, were appropriate to her and to her sort of environment. And so I'd started studying gardening years before I actually had a garden of my own to play with. So this has been very exciting, because I'm able to put all of these little things that I'd sort of wondered into practice. You know, can I garden without spraying my bugs? You know, can I garden without using Miracle-Gro fertilizer? Can I garden and ignore it for 3 weeks and expect my plants to survive? And I actually did fairly well this year, considering I work mostly, I'm most busy in the summer, doing workshops. You know, kids get out of school, they got a whole bunch of time to kill. And so I do a lot of cartooning classes, and we do day camps and lots of fun painting excursions and silly things that we do. It's great. I drop in other day camps. We go swimming and skating and do an art project with the kids. And yeah, it's pretty fun. So I don't have a lot of time in the summer to tend my garden, so it's all about planning and hoping for the best. You know, drought-tolerant gardening is sort of what I've been working on, even in our wet climate. You'd never believe how hard it was raining a half an hour ago, and here it is all sunny and gorgeous out. So it's like a different place all of a sudden. But making the most of that water. So I have big plans. We actually had our toilet replaced about a month ago, and the old toilet's still sitting out in the driveway. And so I'm actually going to reclaim all those pieces. I'll bury them, you know, with like especially the back tank off the top of the toilet. I'll bury that down a few inches into the soil and let it drain into you know, a squash bed or something, tomato, something that is thirsty, something that needs a lot of water. We'll get that big tank, and then I can just fill it with water, and it can slowly trickle down into that bed and keep it nice and moist for, you know, a couple days at a time, right? So I'll plan to do all sorts of water reserves and reservoirs or drip irrigations. I'd like to run something off the tank there, over into the bed here. That might be a little difficult because it's uphill. So I'm still brainstorming that one. I've got some nice, easy to build hand pump designs. So we'll see. Maybe I'll do a little foot pump so I can just stand there and pump it with my foot, and it'll all just spread all out into the garden here. And we'll see. We'll see. I'm going to have to sell a lot of kale. Hey, so thanks for coming and visiting my garden with me, and hanging out and checking it out with me and hearing me ramble a little bit. And I hope this sort of inspires you and intrigues you a little bit as to how sustainability and personal reliance can be a positive thing for everybody, anybody. I mean, you could build something just like this that's only 15 inches wide, and, you know, do a window box out on your deck or out on your kitchen windowsill, or strap it to the front door. I don't know. But then you can, you know, also have some kale or some chard or something that, you know, even if you only get to eat 3 or 4 leaves a week, even if you've only got one kale plant and you only get to pick 2 or 3 leaves off of it, that's so much more nutrition than you're getting from anything at the grocery store. So, you know, it's really important. You know, we don't just eat food to stave off hunger. We eat it to fuel our bodies. And if you're not doing that, then you're really cheating yourself. I mean, I love to indulge too. I make a lot of pie from this apple tree, and it's delicious, and you can't beat it, because I know that those apples, even after being baked in the oven, have more nutrition than an apple off the shelf from the grocery store. So my pie is actually good for me, and I can live with that. So, you know, it takes a lot of food to fuel a comic book. I do really like to cook and eat, and it's one of my favorite things about writing is learning and exploring different cultures, and even if they're imaginary and of my own devising, it all kind of comes from some place or something that I've seen or heard of, or you know, things that I see around my neighborhood or other gardeners tell me about, and I always sort of try to incorporate it and reinvent it for the book. So I just wanted to share sort of where my inspiration comes from with you, and I'm really glad that you came to join me. And I hope you all have a lovely day. I'll give you one more pan of the garden before I go, and thanks again.